Hello, this is Paul Levy here in Pavilion Gardens at my favourite cafe, and it's just coming up to about 8:30 in the morning, and I love this time in the morning. I find it very creative time to write in my book, and when I write books sometimes I love to write at least part of them using a pen and paper, because I find my own writing is more creative than tapping on a computer. It might be different for you. But I just wanted to briefly talk about a phenomenon that was actually registered and noticed quite a few years back in the field of AI, and particularly in the development of search engines. And that is, when you search for something, you can end up getting more than you need. And the term was called overgeneration in the field of AI. And what it meant was, if you prompted AI and prompted a computer to produce something for you, it might be an image, it might be the answer to a question, what it gave you was more than you needed. It seemed to be answering a bigger question. If it was a friend, it wasn't the question you needed. And sometimes you just say, I'm just asking you this. Can you recommend a good restaurant? I'm coming to Brighton. And they start saying, well, restaurants are all very different, and it depends what you mean by a restaurant. And it also depends, of course, whether you are into certain different types of blah, 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 blah. When you just wanted the answer to the best restaurant in Brighton, had they eaten in one, and the answer that you were after was, well, if you're into a good steak, here's a steakhouse. Brighton's famous for fish and chips, and there's a really great gourmet fish and chip restaurant on the seafront. And if you want a pizza, Brighton's got loads of those, and you want a pizza restaurant, and it's called, I don't know, and there's the name. Now, you might think you could have asked a better question. You could have prompted your friend to say, can you recommend a good fish and chip restaurant? And the problem of overgeneration that is noted is that AI isn't always very well programmed to say, I don't know. And actually modern AI is actually got algorithms and program in it coded to please you and develop trust in you, and I guess make you want to use it again. So it doesn't say, I don't know. So if you ask generative AI, can you think of a good fish and chip restaurant in Brighton? In the early days, it was right around the start of ChatGPT, but AI goes back further than that. It would make up the name of a fish and chip restaurant. It might start recommending all kinds of restaurants that do fish, which isn't the same as a fish and chip restaurant. So what it was doing, it was over generating and not being able to say, I don't know. It was always answering. And so if you use a platform such as Perplexity, perplexity.ai is the website, which is a version of Google that claims to be more objective, less biased. It over answers nearly all the time. And you ask a question, and unless you prompt it in advance to say, don't give me a long answer, it will give you a long answer, and it will answer around it. It'll sort of tell the whole story around it. And if that's a friend, you'd say, he never gives me a straight answer. She always gives an overblown response. I always get loads of what I don't need, and I have to interrupt them. And I wish they'd just give me one sentence. And it's very, very hard, if not impossible, without pre-programming it anyway, pre-prompting it by saying, don't give me this, don't give me that. And you waste lots of time if you have to do that all the time. So overgeneration is the generation of too much information. And in the early days of generative AI, that could simply involve over-analysing data, producing in an image far too much detail in terms of pixels. It meant image generation was slower, and it meant you were always having to cut back and re-prompt to get less. Now, why is that of relevance to you? And in some ways this is a friendly bit of advice, and it's that I've been noticing in the last couple of years that when we get, and I work in a business school, when we get essays handed in, I start to look and think, this is a bit thin, this writing. There's quite a bit of repetition in it. That paragraph was quite good, but the next one just seems to be very, very broad and undirected. And it's where a student is, I wouldn't say they're trying to cheat in any way. They're using generative AI to explore something. I might be talking about a particular motivation theory. Let's take the classic one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And what I seem to get is some very, very general stuff around motivation and motivational models and the history of motivation, when all we're asking is a description of a particular model and maybe a critical reflection on it. And when I ask for a critical reflection on it, what I find is there's a critical reflection on the entire field, and mentions of Maslow's hierarchy of needs politically or something like that. And it's because what we're getting, and I think the seagulls in the background here are agreeing with me, is what we're getting is overgeneration. And the danger is students are seeing it all as relevant, are not critiquing it, are not cutting it down, and so the word count is used up really quickly with too much information around something that needed to be much more focused. And so that's the danger of overgeneration, because what it's led to is, if you're using ChatGPT or Bard or Copilot, that now accepts natural language. That was the big breakthrough in 2022 when ChatGPT 3, I think it was, that arrived, is that you can ask it questions, it answers them, and you're having a very understandable, normal, natural language conversation. So you ask it something, tell me about the economic theory of supply and demand. And what you're getting is overcompletion. It's completing the task but overdoing it. It's not discerning, it's not focusing on your question, and quite often we ask questions that are too general and are not focused enough. And it results in, if a student doesn't really know what to include or not, and they paste it all in, you run out of word count really quickly, and quite a lot of it is either too general, too broad, and is not quite answering the question. It's trying to answer something much bigger. And so that's the danger of over-generation, which we've known for a while leads to over-completion. And I think you need to be really, really careful about that, because it will affect you in terms of your grades. And so the skill that we're only learning to develop now has never really changed with AI. It was, if you want to get the best out of one of your teachers, think about the question that you want to ask. If you're dropping them an email asking for some advice on an assignment, asking, what do I need to do to pass, is one question. Asking what are the specifics that you need around Maslow's motivational theory, in terms of, do you want me to describe it and critique it, or just critique it mostly, you'll get a more specific answer. So we've always known that. Garbage in, garbage out. What you ask will determine what you get. But there is a kind of inherent bias in generative AI, because what it does is it over-completes, it over-answers. And if you're on something like LinkedIn, you'll often see clearly AI-generated images that are just full of far too much stuff. I mean, they're almost impossible to decipher, because they've just produced too much stuff. So if you ask generative AI to create an image of teamwork in a certain industry, it's very, very unlikely it's not going to produce a massive, over-detailed picture, almost looking surreal. So the skill is to pre-prompt it by saying as much of what you don't need, and preempt it in a way by saying, please do not give me general contextual information here. I am specifically asking for information in the last 5 years, so please do not give me the whole history of this going back to 1960. And so the better you prompt it, the better the answer and more focused answer you'll get. But I notice even then it's quite hard to stop it from over-completing. And maybe I'll just end this by explaining why. And you can even ask ChatGPT why it does it, and it'll give you a big over-completed answer, which is that it has been pre-trained on literally trillions of documents, and those documents were created by human beings. And human beings tend not to want to be unpopular. And so in all the things we've written and said and created, we've often over-completed too. There's more over-completion in human documents, thoughts, ideas, books, than there is undercompleted. And so, given that artificial intelligence is really impersonating human beings, because it's been pre-trained on all of our information and continues to be, it simply also impersonates, because it thinks we want it, human behavior, which is to overcomplete, is to overgenerate. And the result of it means, if you're not critical about it, if you're not focused, if you don't see that behavior, we're going to get more and more essays coming in, and you'll notice you don't get the grade because you're including lots of irrelevant stuff, because the answers you got out of AI were over-completed and over-generated.